When I'd asked Leona about it later, she'd sobbed that martyred sigh. He's just being dramatic. Wilbur's trying to teach him responsibility. How long has he been treating you like this? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer would destroy me. Since Mom married him 3 years ago. Amos' voice was barely audible. It started small, making me redo chores if they weren't perfect. Then it got worse. The basement incident, the garage, the pieces were now clicking together. Last winter he locked me out for forgetting to shovel the driveway. I slept in your truck when you visited for Christmas Eve. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. He'd slept in my truck on Christmas Eve while I was inside. Your mother knows about all of this. Amos nodded miserably. She says Wilbur's just trying to make me a better person, that I need to stop being so sensitive and learn to follow rules. The rage was building, hot and focused. Martha used to warn me about my temper, but Martha wasn't here. Come on, we're going inside. Grandpa, no. Please, if you make a scene, he'll just what? I turned to face him fully. Make you sleep outside in freezing weather? Beat you? Starve you? Son, it can't get much worse than what's already happening. But I was already walking toward the house. The front door looked solid and expensive. I didn't bother knocking. My boot hit the door just beside the lock with all the force I could muster. Decades of factory work had left me with the strength for this. The wood splintered with a crack that echoed through the neighborhood, and the door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. The warm air rushed out to meet us, carrying the smell of roasted turkey and the sound of shocked silence. I stepped into the entryway, Amos close behind me. The dining room table was set perfectly. Wilbur sat at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. Leona was beside him. They were all frozen mid-motion. "Have you completely lost your mind?" My voice boomed through the room. Leona's face went white. "Dad, what are you doing here? How did you? While you're sitting here feasting like royalty, that boy was freezing outside." I pointed directly at Amos, shivering in my coat. 4 hours. Leona. 4 hours in weather that could have killed him. Wilbur slowly set down his carving knife and rose from his chair. "Who gave you permission to enter my house? This is private property, and you're trespassing." "Private property?" I stepped forward. "You mean the property where you locked my grandson outside to freeze while you ate dinner?" "This is a private family matter," Wilbur said, his voice controlled but dangerous. "No business. That's my grandson you nearly killed with your private family matter." Wilbur crossed his arms. "The boy ruined our holiday. He needed to learn a lesson about responsibility and consequences." A lesson? I could barely believe what I was hearing. You nearly froze a child to death over a slightly burnt turkey. He's 18, not a child. And this is my house with my rules. I'm trying to teach him discipline, something his mother obviously failed to do in his first 17 years. Discipline? That's called child abuse, and you're lucky I don't call the police right now. Child abuse. Wilbur actually laughed, a cold sound. He forgot to turn off a timer. I sent him outside to think about his actions. That's not abuse, that's parenting. 4 hours in 5-degree weather. He's being dramatic, just like always. Wilbur waved his hand dismissively. "Look at him. He's fine. A little cold never hurt anyone." "Dad, please." Leona finally spoke up, her voice shaky. "Don't ruin our holiday. We can discuss this later as a family." "Ruin your holiday? Your son was sitting outside freezing while you ate dinner, and you're worried about me ruining your holiday. Because this is my house, and Amos is not my biological son. I have every right to discipline him as I see fit, Wilbur declared. There it was, the truth finally out. Amos didn't matter because he wasn't Wilbur's blood. You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson, I said, my voice deadly quiet. I don't owe that boy anything. If he doesn't like my rules, he can find somewhere else to live. Then we're done here. I closed my phone and put it back in my pocket, my decision made. Amos is coming home with me now.
I watched Wilbur's smug face crack. He had expected me to call the police, to engage in a messy confrontation that he could control. He hadn't expected me to simply leave with the problem. You wouldn't dare, Wilbur said, trying to intimidate me with his size. Try me. I placed my hand firmly on Amos' shoulder. Amos, go get your things. You're coming home with me. You can't just take him, Leona said, her voice rising with panic. Watch me. I guided Amos toward the stairs. Unless you prefer I call the authorities and let them sort it out. Amos led the way up the narrow staircase. I could hear Wilbur's heavy footsteps behind us. This is kidnapping. Wilbur called out. I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. I didn't turn around. I spoke loudly enough for him to hear every word. He's 18 years old. He has every right to leave with his grandfather. You, however, have 4 hours of neglect and abuse to explain to the police and social services when I call them from a warm house. Amos' room was small. He quickly grabbed a backpack, stuffing clothes, his laptop, and a few books inside. I saw the baseball glove and comic books on the bed and tossed the gift bags inside. You're not causing problems, son, I said, looking at his small, carefully packed bag. You never were. We came back down the stairs. Leona was sobbing near the dining room, but she didn't try to stop us. Wilbur stood by the shattered door frame, a study in impotent rage. Don't ever come near my family again, old man, he spat. I didn't dignify that with a response. I focused on Amos. We walked out the door and back into the cold, the warm, deceiving light of the perfect Thanksgiving table spilling across the snow behind us. In the truck, I held Amos until he stopped shaking. I took him home. The next day, I made good on my promise. That phone call to social services and the police with my eyewitness account of the exposure and the history of abuse was the beginning of the justice. Wilbur was charged with assault and neglect. Leona, finally separated from Wilbur's control, had to face her own culpability, but she chose to support Amos and testify. The perfect suburban life they'd prioritized over child safety was shattered. Amos, safe at my house, finally slept without fear. He was going to college. He had a family who believed him, and he had a grandfather who knew that sometimes justice required more than just words. What do you think was the final consequence for Leona after she testified against Wilbur? Based on the narrative's resolution and the nature of the charges, the final consequence for Leona after she testified against Wilbur would primarily be loss and accountability, rather than criminal charges, allowing a difficult path toward reconciliation with Amos. While Leona's actions or inaction enabled the abuse, the narrative suggests she was partially a victim of Wilbur's emotional control and manipulation. She didn't defend herself, just stood there taking it the way she probably always did. Her willingness to eventually testify against Wilbur positions her as someone who finally chose her son's safety over her marriage, which often leads to leniency in abuse cases where the primary abuser is identified. Leona would face an immediate and devastating end to her marriage. This would result in the loss of her perfect suburban life, the house, the comfortable financial situation provided by Wilbur. This financial instability and divorce would be a major consequence, forcing her to rebuild her life entirely. Even with Amos being 18 and Wilbur facing charges, CPS would investigate Leona's role, particularly concerning the younger daughter, who was also present. Leona would likely be placed under supervision for the younger child for a period, demonstrating her ability to make safe choices independently of Wilbur. She would be mandated to undergo individual and family therapy to address her codependency and the enabling behavior she exhibited during the 3 years of abuse. The incident would become public knowledge within their community, due to the police response and the severity of the charges against Wilbur, leading to severe social consequences and damage to her reputation. This is the most crucial consequence. While she didn't face the criminal charges Wilbur did, Leona faced the consequence of nearly destroying her bond with her son. Her ability to rebuild this relationship depends on genuine repentance or commitment to therapy, and her ability to consistently prioritize Amos' well-being over her own comfort or pride. By testifying against Wilbur and accepting accountability for her inaction, she takes the painful but necessary first steps toward earning back the relationship she nearly lost. The final scene, where Amos is safe and Leona is working with her father to secure her future, suggests a difficult but hopeful path toward eventual forgiveness and a truly reunited family. I could hear Wilbur behind us, his heavy footsteps on the hardwood, but I didn't turn around. "This is kidnapping," Wilbur called out. "I'll have you arrested for kidnapping." Good luck explaining to the police why my grandson was sitting outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours, I retorted. I reached the top of the stairs and followed Amos down a short hallway to a small room at the back of the house. The room was barely big enough for a twin bed and a small dresser, no visible heat vent, and the single window faced north, letting in the coldest air. It looked more like a storage room than a bedroom. "This is where you sleep?" I asked, taking in the sparse furnishings. Amos nodded, already pulling clothes from the dresser. "Wilbur says the basement room is for guests and the other upstairs room is for my sister." Even in his own home, he was an outsider. "Take everything that matters to you," I said, standing guard at the doorway. "We're not coming back for anything." "Amos, think about what you're doing." Leona appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "This is your home, your family." "Some family," Amos muttered, folding a Dayton University sweatshirt into his bag. "Real families don't lock each other outside to freeze. Wilbur was just trying to teach me responsibility by giving me hypothermia." He looked up at his mother. "Mom, he made me sleep in the garage last week because I left a glass in the sink." "A glass? That's not normal." Leona's face crumpled. He has high standards. He wants you to be better." "He wants me gone," Amos said quietly, zipping up his bag. "And you know it." We made our way back downstairs, Wilbur waiting at the bottom like a bouncer. "You leave my house, boy, and you don't come back ever." "Fine by me," Amos said, and I heard real strength in his voice for the first time all day. The front door was still hanging open. The cold air poured into the house. "Amos," Leona called out as we reached the door, "please don't do this. I love you." He stopped, turned back to look at his mother one last time. "If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have let this happen." We walked to my truck in silence. I threw his bag in the bed and helped him into the passenger seat. Through the front window of the house, I could see the family still standing in the entryway. "You ready?" I asked, putting the truck in reverse. "I've been ready for 3 years," Amos said, pulling my coat tighter. We merged onto I-75 North. "Tell me about college," I said. "What are you studying?" "Engineering. Mechanical engineering, like you used to do at the factory. Like grandfather, like grandson." I smiled. "We'll figure out the tuition. Don't worry about that." "Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden." "Son, you're not a burden. You're family, and family takes care of each other." My house seemed to glow with welcome as we approached. I helped Amos carry his bag inside. The house smelled like coffee and the lingering scent of Martha's lavender sachets. "This is your room now," I said, showing him the guest room. "Your grandmother always said life was too short to be cold in your own house." We worked together in the kitchen, thawing chicken and washing vegetables. "Tell me more about what's been happening," I said as I seasoned the chicken. "He controls everything. When I eat, what I eat, when I can shower, when I can use the phone." Amos' voice was small. He made Mom choose between him and me, and she chose him. "What did you mean she chose him?" "Last Christmas when you visited, Wilbur had told me I wasn't allowed to speak unless someone asked me a direct question, and Mom didn't say anything to stop him." "Why doesn't your mother stand up to him?" "She's scared. She told me once that if she leaves him, she'll lose the house and have to move back to that apartment complex where we used to live. She can't afford to take care of us on her own." We settled by the fire. "Tell me about the good things," I said. "I made Dean's list last semester, and I've got this friend, Jake. who's teaching me to play guitar. Your grandmother always wanted to learn guitar. I pointed to Martha's photo on the mantel. We talked until the chicken was done. We sat down to eat our simple but satisfying meal. We'll call the college tomorrow, I said. That's what family's for. The peaceful crackling of the fireplace was shattered by 3 sharp knocks on the front door. The sound of multiple voices on my porch followed. I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my doorstep, and behind them were Wilbur and Leona. Mr. Burke, the lead officer called out. Police, we need to speak with you. I took a deep breath and opened the door, my body positioned to block their view of Amos. What can I do for you, officers? Wilbur immediately stepped forward, pointing an accusatory finger. Officer, this man kidnapped my stepson. He broke into our house and took the boy without permission. Sir, we need to sort out the situation. Mr. Burke, is there a young man named Amos Green on these premises? Yes, I said simply. My grandson is here. Before Wilbur could launch into another tirade, Amos appeared beside me, still wrapped in a blanket. His voice was quiet but clear. I want to stay with my grandpa. See, he's been filling the boy's head with lies. Wilbur roared. What lies? I stepped forward. The truth about how you left him outside in freezing weather for 4 hours. The truth about how you've been abusing him for 3 years. The first officer looked between us with weary eyes. Mr. Burke, we're going to need everyone to come inside so we can discuss this properly. I stepped back, reluctantly. Wilbur followed immediately, Leona trailing behind him with her eyes fixed on the floor. She looked smaller, diminished. Now then, the officer said, pulling out his notepad. Mr. Green, you claim this man kidnapped your stepson. Absolutely. I came home to find my front door broken and Amos gone. Son, did this man force you to come with him? The officer asked Amos. No, sir. Amos' voice was barely above a whisper. He saved me. Saved you from what? Amos glanced nervously at Wilbur. From freezing to death on the front porch. I accidentally burned the turkey this morning. Wilbur made me sit outside in the cold to think about my actions. I was out there for over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. He's exaggerating, Wilbur said quickly. It was maybe an hour, and he was dressed warmly. An hour? I stared at him. Officer, my grandson was sitting on that porch in a thin shirt and jeans when I arrived at 3:15. He'd been there since 11 this morning. The first officer looked at Wilbur with new interest. Sir, is it true you made the young man sit outside as punishment? Briefly, yes, but he's making it sound worse than it was, in freezing weather for several hours. Look, sometimes teenagers need firm discipline. His mother and I agreed that. Mom didn't agree to anything, Amos said, his voice gaining strength. She just didn't stop you. All eyes turned to Leona. She stood by the doorway like she was ready to run, her hands clasped tightly. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that whatever she said next would determine whether she stepped back to safety or plunged into the abyss. Ma'am, the officer urged, what's your version of events? Her hand shook as she darted her eyes between Wilbur's expectant face and Amos' hopeful eyes. Mrs. Green, the first officer said gently, we need to know what really happened today. Wilbur moved closer to his wife, positioning himself to loom over her, his eyes issuing a subtle, menacing warning. Tell them, honey. Tell them how your father has been poisoning Amos against our family. The officer noticed it. Sir, please step back and let your wife speak for herself. Leona's voice came out as barely a whisper. She cleared her throat. Amos did burn the turkey this morning, and Wilbur was upset, very upset. Her eyes darted to her husband, then quickly away. He said Amos needed to learn responsibility by sitting outside in freezing weather. How long was he outside, ma'am? Another glance at Wilbur, who was standing rigid with barely controlled anger. Since around 11. Until when? Until my father arrived. Around 3:15. The officer did quick math. Over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. She's making it sound worse than it was. Wilbur interjected. He could have come inside any time if he'd apologized and shown some remorse. No, he couldn't, Leona said suddenly, and everyone turned to stare at her. You locked the door. You told me not to let him in no matter what. The silence was deafening. Wilbur's face cycled through white, red, and back to white. "Leona," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth." She looked at Amos, tears forming in her eyes. "For once in 3 years, I'm telling the truth." "Mrs. Green, has this kind of punishment happened before?" the officer pressed. "Yes," the word rushed out. "He's made Amos sleep in the garage in the basement. He's locked him out of the house overnight. He controls when Amos can eat, when he can shower, when he can speak at the dinner table." "Leona, shut up." Wilbur's mask finally slipped completely. "You have no idea what you're doing. You'll destroy everything we've built." "What we've built?" She turned on him with sudden fury. "What have we built except fear and misery? Look at my son. Look what you've done to him." I watched Amos' face transform as his mother finally stood up for him. 3 years of doubt and self-blame seemed to melt away. The first officer moved toward Wilbur. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is ridiculous. You're going to arrest me based on the word of a bitter old man and his delusional daughter. Based on the physical evidence and multiple corroborating testimonies about child endangerment," the officer said calmly, pulling out his handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." As they led Wilbur toward the door, he turned back to Leona, his eyes venomous. "You'll regret this betrayal. You'll lose everything. The house, the money, everything. You'll be nothing without me." "I'd rather be nothing than watch you hurt my son," she said, sounding like the strong woman who'd raised Amos on her own. The door closed, leaving the three of us alone. Leona collapsed into a chair, crying deep, wrenching sobs. Amos went to her immediately, kneeling beside her. "Mom's okay. It's over now." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you. I should have been stronger." "You were strong tonight," I said. "When it mattered most, you chose your son over your husband. That took real courage." The fire crackled steadily. The truth had finally been spoken, and justice was being served. For months later, the morning sun streamed through my kitchen window. Leona flipped pancakes on the griddle, and Amos sat at the table, reviewing his full scholarship acceptance letter from Ohio State's engineering program. "That's what happens when you're brilliant and work hard," Leona said, sliding pancakes onto his plate. She looked stronger, more confident. The part-time job at the local library and the divorce settlement had given her the independence she'd never had. "Your grandmother would have been so proud," I said, settling into my chair. The kitchen felt alive again. Leona had moved in permanently. "Dad, are you sure you don't mind us staying here indefinitely?" "Independence is overrated," I said, meaning every word. "Family is what matters." Later, Leona arranged new family photos on the mantel, alongside Martha's picture. One from our fishing trip, and one from our first real family Christmas. "Any word from Wilbur?" I asked. "His lawyer called yesterday. He lost his job at the supermarket and is moving back to Cleveland to live with his sister." She shrugged. "I feel sorry for him sometimes, but then I remember what he did to Amos, and the feeling passes pretty quickly." That afternoon, while Amos was at guitar practice, Leona and I worked in the garden, preparing Martha's vegetable patch. There was something hopeful about planting seeds and planning for growth. "Dad," Leona said, "I need to thank you again for what you did. If you hadn't come that day—" "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Truth has a way of winning out in the end." That evening, we settled into our routine. Dinner, followed by a quiet evening. Amos was practicing his guitar. Leona worked on a crossword. I read the newspaper. Predictable, peaceful, safe. "Grandpa," Amos said during a commercial break, setting down his guitar, "I've been thinking about changing my major to social work, maybe counseling. I want to help other kids who are going through what I went through." I felt a surge of pride. "That's a fine goal. Your grandmother always said the best way to heal from pain is to help others avoid it." Later, Amos and I stood on the back porch looking at the stars. "Ready for fishing season to open?" I asked. "Can't wait." "Thank you for coming to get me," Amos said as we headed back inside. "Thank you for being worth saving." The house was warm and bright. We had learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when it matters most, telling the truth even when it's hard, and protecting the people you love, no matter what the cost. Martha would have been proud of all of us. If you like this story, Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right. Thank you for watching.